Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRNAM for Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. And our top story today is paid sick leave, good for business. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Dr. Candice Vander Weerdt. She's an associate professor at Cleveland State University. Well, Candice, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Hi, thank you.
All right, so I know we're going to talk about the study that Cleveland State University and Florida Atlantic University kind of partnered on, and I want to get to that around paid sick leave, and I want to get to that in just a minute. But just broadly speaking, how many employers, what percentage of employers currently offer paid sick leave to their benefits to their employees?
Well, it's a good amount. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think in terms of the United States, and I have the figure handy, 79% of civilian workers were covered by paid sick leave in March of 2022. Amongst the highest earning Americans, 94%. So in the top quartile, 94% are offered paid sick leave. But if you look down into the lower salary ranges, at the bottom quartile, only about 50% are covered by paid sick leave.
So why wouldn't paid sick leave? I mean, we're going to get into the merits of paid sick leave and actually why it's good for business, but why wouldn't an organization offer paid sick leave? Is that they believe that it may not be profitable, that, you tell me, why would someone not offer a paid sick leave benefit?
Well, there is a concern that with offering access to paid sick leave, that absenteeism or absence from work will increase, that workers will stay home when they're sick, and that can lower productivity. However, we found that workers staying home sick are good for the business. We were really surprised to find things like occupational injuries had reduced when states had passed paid sick leave laws. We also found that contagion had decreased quite a bit. So you might have, somebody miss a little bit of work, but if they're not spreading it throughout the entire organization, that can reduce absences overall, which is what one of our studies had reported to.
Yeah, well, I mean, you make a really good point, and let's kind of carry it through some of the lessons from the pandemic. Obviously, we quarantined for 2 years, a lot of remote work, but there were probably some instances where people had to go to work because they had jobs, manufacturing jobs, or jobs that required them to be at the office. And if you kind of carry it through, if I get a cold and I give it to my coworker, or even worse, I get the flu and I traipse in and I'm a warrior and I go in there, that actually could lower productivity because I'm getting my coworker sick. First of all, I'm sick. I'm never going to be great at less than 100%, and my coworker might get sick. And by the way, their family and other coworkers may get sick. So you might set off a whole chain of events. Oh,
yes, absolutely. And, you mentioned the pandemic. Some of our studies were conducted after the pandemic or with data from the pandemic. And, the COVID-19 spread had really decreased in areas that were covered by paid sick leave or paid sick leave mandates. But even we had research that looked back to the H1N1 flu, and they saw similar results. The contagion had reduced when people were able to stay home when they were sick.
Right, and you looked at, kind of looking at the study. There's 22 years of research. So I mean, this would go back. We're not just looking. Your data set is not just the pandemic. It goes back to 2000, 2001. I'm trying to remember what year
2000,
right, 2000, 2001. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant set of data.
Yeah. And, in 2009, there were no states that had any kind of paid sick leave mandate. And right now, I believe Illinois will be the 15th state. I can't be certain if that one is passed or not, but it was, last I checked, 14 states and the region of DC. Since then, we've been able to really gather a lot of data regarding what those paid sick leave mandates do. So you can look at regions that had passed some kind of mandate and tease out what that does to contagion and what that does to occupational injuries, that was the shocking one for me. I really didn't think we were going to see any movement in occupational injuries, but we saw not only one study, but two studies that saw a decrease in occupational injuries. Those are really costly for organizations. So if you can reduce those, it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, not only occupational or like working heavy equipment, but also think about driving.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, delivery. If you're working, for example, for Amazon or UPS or FedEx and you're sick, look, the chances are you have a lower attention span. You could get into a car accident that would result in a greater liability, which therefore would translate into higher insurance costs and higher, potential lawsuits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this presenteeism is a real problem. Presenteeism is what we call people who go to work when they're sick. So it's kind of the opposite of absenteeism, where you would stay home when you're sick. But presenteeism can be a serious problem for all kinds of workers. Healthcare workers, when they had access to paid sick leave, were less likely to go to work sick, twice as likely not to go to work sick when they had access to paid sick leave. We don't want our healthcare workers to be sick. And also food service workers, retail workers, those numbers had decreased a lot too when they had access to paid sick leave.
Yeah, it's funny. I was on the street going to pick up some bananas. My wife and I go through a lot of bananas with our smoothies. And I was passing by somebody on the street, I think a city worker here in Charlotte, who was coughing. And I'm like, oh, well, that person probably, I hope it's not COVID, but that person probably should just be home, even if they're working outside. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. Just before we go to a commercial break, on average, when we talk about paid sick leave, I mean, how many days are we talking about in general? Is it 3 days, 5 days, 10 days?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked, because it's a real complex variable. Our study operationalized paid sick leave as any access to paid time off. So whether it was paid sick leave, or they called it sick days, or paid time off, any access to it was treated as the variable of interest. So we saw a wide variety of 5 days versus 10 days versus a week. We also saw great variation in inclusivity. Did it include everybody at the organization or just a few? Did it include part-time or full-time? And then also there was another variable. Weaving is the researcher that looked at it in this really different way, as not just a dichotomist, was it there or not? But there was another variable that was considered. I can't recall offhand.
Well, maybe,
Generosity,
Well, you know what? Hold that thought, because I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to get the answer to that question, and we're going to talk about presenteeism and the next steps needed to implement paid sick leave. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're joined this morning by Dr. Candice Vander Weerdt. She's an associate professor at Cleveland State University. Candice, thanks so much for sticking with us this morning.
Thanks. I'm glad to, my pleasure.
And during the commercial break, you had an opportunity that last variable.
Yeah.
It's autonomy, right?
Yeah. So whether they could use it for their own sick leave or taking care of their children or a doctor's appointment. So how different those policies were, they did make a significant impact on how it was used. But for our research, we just looked at whether it was there or not, and we still saw really interesting results.
So let's talk about absenteeism for a second, because that's a major concern. We'll get to the states that have prohibit laws for sick leave, or mandatory sick leave. But let's talk about absenteeism. How do you anybody and their mother can call out. And by the way, I know people that they could have office jobs. They might call out because their kid's sick, or maybe they didn't feel like, they called it a mental health day is what we used to call it back in the day. They just said, I'm going to call out. But how do you validate if you're an employer and you're offering the service? There's really no way. What are you going to send them a thermometer and say, take a screenshot of a thermometer to show me you're not 98.6?
Yeah, this is a great point. And I think, the one paper we didn't see in this review, we didn't see an explicit investigation of abuse. So abuse of sick leave policies was not something that was measured. When the researchers of our studies looked at the use of paid sick leave, they asked the question, how many days did you miss for illness or injury, right? So that's how they measured absenteeism. I find more compelling evidence on the outcomes associated with those absences from work. So when we see spread decrease in a region after a paid sick leave mandate has been passed, I would argue that means that the absences are used appropriately. So when the spread of disease goes down and whatever, it could be COVID or H1N1 or any influenza-like illness, that indicates to me that people are using it appropriately for when they're sick. Otherwise, we wouldn't see drops in occupational injury or what are those called? Influenza-like illness spread like we did. So that, as far as abuse, I don't know if we could talk about that because we didn't see that paper. But we could say that there was some appropriate uses of absences.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, in any system, there's going to be abuses, right? People are going to take advantage. That's just human nature.
Right.
And the reality is, if I'm a boss or I run a business, and I do run a business, but if I had employees, I'd be thinking about how do I make my business the most productive? And what makes my business the most productive, most profitable is having employees that are able to work. And if they're not sick or they're distracted, because one of the things we talk about, Candice, is the impact of finance on mental health, and how if you don't have good financial wellness, that's going to have an impact on productivity. That's an underappreciated. We're not just talking about H1N1 or COVID. There's also mental health maladies that people can have. So all those things,
Absolutely.
if I'm a boss, I want my people to be as productive as possible. And that means if they're sick, get out of my office or
Yeah.
don't come to work.
Yeah, and then we did see a few papers that addressed what happened to the business when they had allowed for paid sick leave. The one paper used a Kaufman survey or data set that looked at new businesses, so initial businesses that had started up, and they looked at all the kinds of benefits that they offered and how that related to the survivability of the firm. So if they were around after so many years, they found that paid sick leave was one of the significant predictors of survivability. There were some benefits that weren't associated with survivability, like educational assistance or something, but paid sick leave was one of them. That if you had that, you had a lot higher likelihood of staying in business. Another paper looked at business bankruptcies in a region after a paid sick leave law had passed, and there was no significant difference in business bankruptcies. So the idea that the business can tolerate this type of expense is supported by the research.
And last question for you. Benefits seem to be a key driver in today's labor market. And if we've read and heard about small businesses having trouble attracting employees. So being able to offer benefits like healthcare, retirement, student loan matching programs to help people pay off their student loans, because there are a lot of people, by the way, out there that have student loans. This seems to me, if you offer this as an opportunity, so you get, let's just say you get the traditional 2 weeks, traditional vacation, so it's 10 days if you're just starting, and maybe you get some paid time off. That seems to me to be an attractive benefit that would actually help you with your hiring practices as a smaller business.
Absolutely. And the employees like it too. You know, we saw effects on employee morale, retention, lower turnover when people have the option to stay home when they're sick.
And there's not that, I don't think it has to be like this employer versus the employee relationship. I mean, at the end of the day, if the employer is not around to offer the job, the employee needs to go somewhere else. And you know, there doesn't have to be this butting of heads. I mean, I think people think about it that way a lot of times, but the reality is, I don't think people want to go to a job that they're, you know, you're not at war with your employer. Your employer's offering your job an opportunity. You get paid a wage that you negotiate, maybe, and you go from there. It doesn't have to be this tete-a-tete.
I agree. It can be a mutually beneficial relationship.
That's the way it used to be, at least. Well, Candice, we're going to have to leave it there. Really interesting study. Really appreciate the work that you and your colleagues, both at Cleveland State and Florida Atlantic University, put forth in this research. And we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
All right. Thank you for having me.
And that wraps up this episode of BRNAM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, and all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content? Well, visit our website and, of course, all of our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRNAM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Tax audits, tax liens, wage garnishments.
Every day we hear stories like this about good folks who are simply struggling to pay their bills. Each of them are living a frightening IRS tax nightmare, and they are afraid it will destroy their lives.
I'm a divorced single mom, and my ex-husband left me and the kids with a lot of unpaid bills, including unpaid taxes. I was really starting to show my stress on my kids because the IRS had sent me a letter demanding a huge payment from me. I couldn't afford it. So then the IRS was threatening to garnish my wages. I'm already living paycheck to paycheck. That would have put me over the edge financially.
It truly seemed hopeless, but then a friend at work told her to call the tax relief line.
The people at the tax relief line, they told me about something called innocent spouse relief. They worked it out so that all of the taxes from my ex are not my problem. I don't know how that works, and I don't care. All I care about is that I don't owe the IRS a dime, and they are not going to take my paycheck.
Even if it seems hopeless, you should call the number on your screen right now. There is absolutely no cost for the call or the consultation. You are under no obligation. If you are worried that the IRS could garnish your wages, seize your assets, even take your home, call us right now. The Tax Relief Line is here to help you. Now, you have a knowledgeable, professional team of tax experts that are ready to negotiate with the IRS and fight for you to save you money. The Tax Relief Line's professionals have successfully negotiated thousands of cases, reducing and sometimes even eliminating the tax debt for their clients. It's very easy to get started. Simply call the number on your screen right now. You don't have to live in fear anymore. The call and the consultation are free.